This is the Bible Ranger, and today we're going to be talking about Islam, basically from dummy to defending your faith. So this might be a little longer, but it'll be all well worth it. Now, these are the questions we're going to cover. What do they believe? Is Islam peaceful, loving, or violent? The hidden history of Islam. What do we have in common, and where do we differ? What is their greatest sin? How did it all start? Do they have a role in the end times? I'm going to say yes, but that's another part. And do we serve the same God? And what are the satanic verses? All right, these are terms. Now, Islam is basically the religion, the culture, and the community. And it means to submit to God or submit to Allah. Now, Muslim is the people who follow the religion. I think the females are called Muslimah. So the Quran, it means the recitation. It's their holy book and it's considered unchanged and perfect according to them. Now dictated to Muhammad by the angel Gabriel and relayed orally to the followers. This is what they claim. It started about 600 years after Christ. And the chapters are called surahs. And there's 114 chapters. They also have names to make it easy to find, but they're all surahs. And it's divided into two major categories of content. It's the time he spent in Mecca and the time he spent in Medina. Now this is just if you want to read what I have. All right, the Quran is less than 2/3 the size of the New Testament. It looks a little thicker because part of it is their Arabic writing and the other part is, like, let's say English. Now Muslims also study another set of writings, a big collection. It's called the Hadith. And these are stories of Muhammad himself. That way they can imitate him. Now they have the 5 pillars of Islam, which is fundamental to their faith. Number 1, they pray 5 times a day, daily, facing Mecca, which is Saudi Arabia, no matter what part of the earth you are in. Now, number 2, giving to the poor, like an alms. Number 3, fasting during Ramadan, which is like a month long. They have breaks in between now, depending on the sunset. 4, at least one pilgrimage to Mecca in your lifetime, if you can physically do it, and if you can economically do it. And number 5, the profession of faith. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. This is if you want to see the Arabic names for it. So the question is Islam peaceful or is it violent? Well, this is the answer. Muhammad's first 12 years took place in Mecca. That's where he used to live, where there was no Jewish tribes or people there. And he had a small amount of followers. Matter of fact, the first 3 years, he had 30 people. That's written somewhere in one of his books. He said that I'm written in the Torah, which is the Old Testament. And when we get to meet Jewish people, they will tell you and they will confirm that it talks about me because they know their scripture. Well, he finally got his wish 12 years later, and he moved to Medina, where there were 3 Jewish tribes there. And the Jews almost laughed him out of the city. Now, you got to realize after talking about this meeting the Jews thing, how highly problematic it became for him. So I would imagine that would be so totally embarrassing. There was a lot of questioning of his authority. So he came up with the conclusion, since he was a prophet, he thought of himself, he concluded that the Jews were evil liars. And now they were his enemies. And of course, when he met the Christians, they also agreed with the Jews, and they were enemies also. This is how you get the loving part, because the loving part was, wait till you see our next brothers, our Jewish and our Christian brothers, and then when he finally got to see them, they didn't agree with him. Now they became his enemy. And so we have peaceful verses and we have hateful verses. Now, shirk, some of these spellings are different because of the way the language is. Sometimes you put an I in it, sometimes you put an E in it. Like Quran, sometimes it's with a K, sometimes it's with a Q. So shirk is the worst sin to commit as a Muslim. It's basically a ticket straight to hell. And you're basically saying Jesus is Lord. And if you were under a Sharia controlled state, it's penalty of death. All right. Now, while most Muslims are peaceful, and that's very important to say. I work with a lot of them for many years. I even invited them to my house. They didn't come because they were afraid we were going to serve them something they couldn't eat. But Islam was practically founded in violence, even from the very beginning. And I'm going to give you several examples. Now, I might butcher some of the names up, so excuse me, but Ullman, a caliph of Muhammad, which is basic caliph is like a high religious leader, was killed by Muslims. Ali bin Abib, a cousin of Muhammad, killed by Muslims. A grandson of Muhammad beheaded by Muslims. Another grandson named Al-Hassan was betrayed and poisoned by Muslims. Talha and Al-Zubair, he was promised paradise by Muhammad, and he was also killed by Muslims. Now, many of Muhammad's extended family were killed, about 73 of them. That's a lot of killing from the prophet that you love. Think about that. Now, did God fail to deliver the peaceful message of Islam, or was it not even revealed from God to Muhammad at all? That's an important question. Now, think about this. The Sunnis, which got established about 50 years after Muhammad's death, have been fighting with the Shiites for like forever, for 1400 years. The reason they're not fighting right now is because they kind of band together to fight the infidels, which they agree that are the enemy of Islam. So what happened to submitting to Allah's will? I mean, that's what it means to submit to his will. Why do they keep fighting and killing their own people? I don't get it. Let me give you some Muslim history here. Now, Christians must learn about Islam because ignorance is their fertilizer. They grow like that. So Islam will insert itself in all kinds of places in the culture. As an example, in the 1960s, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X first converted to the Nation of Islam, which is more like a cult. Then ordinary Islam. Okay, now the message was that Christianity was a white man's religion, and that's why they enslaved blacks while Islam liberates. But that wasn't the truth. This is the real truth. Muhammad bought and sold slaves. Then his followers institutionalized the African slave trade. Now you're thinking, Bible Ranger, are you exaggerating? No, I'm not exaggerating. In contrast to the European Christians, they would take a slave-rich area, and through time, it didn't happen overnight, but through time, they would buy the slaves from their neighbors, and then they would liberate them and actually set them free. Right around 1801, way back when we were a new country, America, we were doing trades, and we would take this canal here, the Straits of Gibraltar, to the Mediterranean Sea, which was called the Barbary Coast. And we have some countries here in Africa named Morocco and Algeria and Tunis and Tripoli. And I'll show you that in the next screen. But Thomas Jefferson, we were having a lot of trouble with the pirates there, and they would take over the merchandise or demand a ransom, and we were losing a lot of money. So he tried to reason with them, and being the Secretary of State then, and he said he found it impossible to negotiate with them because the Muslim pirate leaders, they would use their Islamic religion to justify the plundering and the enslavement of non-Muslims. So a few years later, when he became the president, he sent the Navy and the Marines to fight them. And we were victorious, and it became part of the Marine Corps song, the hymn. It goes something like this. It goes from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. And I never knew what that was until I should say it took me a while to find out what Tripoli was, a few years after I joined the military. But basically Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, and Tripoli. Here's another slide if you want to read that. And here's all the trade. So when I said that Muhammad's followers instituted the trade slave, the African trade slaves, this is what I meant. I mean, they did all that from 1500s to 1900s. That's a lot. This is what we have in common. We both believe in one God. We believe that Jesus, virgin birth, believe it or not. They believe that Jesus performed miracles. They'll even say that he performed the most miracles. Jesus is the Messiah. Now they believe a different thing with the Messiah, but they do believe that. It's in their writings. That they believe that Allah or God's word, that Jesus is God's word. And I think they must have got part of that they must have heard some Christians along the way, like John 1:1, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. And somehow they put it in there where he didn't really understand the meaning of it. Now this is what we do not have in common. Jesus was not divine. Oh, one other thing up here, I should have put up here, they believe that Jesus was sinless. That's incredible. But they don't do anything with that. Now, not in common. Jesus was not divine. Jesus did not die on the cross. That's highly important. And because he did not die on the cross, he did not resurrect. That's super highly important. Matter of fact, that shuts down Christianity right there. If he didn't die on the cross, we all would be damned. And if he didn't resurrect, we have no hope. So now to be a little bit more descriptive, they don't believe he died on the cross because some of them believe that another person that looked like him died on the cross, that God took him up before all that happened. Now, another thing they don't believe, that Jesus is not the Son of God. That's very important too. Now, Muslims, life is without grace, and I mean the grace of God. It's work-based. Okay, you have to be 51% good at the end of your life. You have to work yourself there. Now, they don't believe in a Trinity, which I'd rather use the word triune God. And we don't believe in three gods. Don't get that wrong, okay? We believe in one God in three persons. But it's not a polygod, okay? It's not many. He's just one God, but he reveals himself through the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, the Muslims believe in following Muhammad as an example. So there's where the Hadith comes in play, because the Hadith is about Muhammad and his deeds. So the Quran itself is mostly theology, almost all of it. Unlike the Bible that has theology, also has you a lot of places and a lot of history also. So Muhammad had at least 13 wives. Okay, one wife was made to sit, or a future wife was made to sit on his lap while they were torturing her husband so they can find out where he was hiding the money. Once he told them through torture where he was hiding the money, they beheaded him, and she had to see this while she was sitting on Muhammad's lap. And then he married her. Now, out of all his wives, 2 of them were Jewish, and hopefully I can come up with a story about that on the next one. Now, Aisha, I think, is one of the most important wives. That was the youngest one. He married her when she was 6 years old, and he knew her biblically when she was 9. Okay, this is her own words. In her own words, she says something like this. She was playing with other kids on a swing. Her mother called her very loudly, so she ran to her mother in earnest. By the time she ran to her mom, she was out of breath, and her mother left her outside the tent while she catched her breath. She wiped her face and her hands and all that, and then she brought her inside and handed her over to other people that cleaned her up. And she was presented to Muhammad at 9 years old, and he was about 50 years old. I mean, that's disgusting. Anybody else would call that pedophiling. All right. Now, you got some apologists out there that say, oh, no, that was interpreted wrong, or that's an interpretation of somebody else. Well, guess what? There's countries out there that permit this either way. So, you might say that, but there's countries that still go by this word. I mean, look at this picture here. It's like a plethora of kids getting married. It's crazy. This is an incredible statement. Okay, the Muslims, they want to follow Muhammad, but at the same time, if you look at Muhammad, he's broken, I think, all the 10 commandments, maybe 9 of them. It's incredible. It's like this is the person you want as your example. Now, this is a list of his wives, okay, and most of them say widow. And if you see this, I have not researched it, but I would bet that most of these widow ones were made widow by him or his followers. Okay, and here's his first wife. That was the encouragement that started him off, and then the young one is right here. 9 years old when he knew her. Wow. Questionable origins. Now, one day Muhammad was in a cave, and he would do this for quite some time. He would spend some time in a cave. He would worship Allah by himself. And one day after doing this, he was met by supposedly an angel, Gabriel, which commanded him in a forceful way, like a choke, to read. He was showing him something to read, and Muhammad would say, I can't read. And he did this 3 times, and Muhammad, because Muhammad was illiterate, and he left the cave in fear for his life. And his first wife encouraged him. He said, you're not going to get hurt because you're a messenger of God, you're a prophet of God, you're going to be fine. And she introduced him to other people too, and they try to encourage him. So eventually he went back, and he would memorize what this angel, I believe the fallen angel, Gabriel, would tell him, and he would recite it to his scribes. Now, in the Bible, there is no angel in the Bible who would treat one of God's messenger in such a way. There's no record like that. And in the contrary, they tell you, fear not. Or like in Daniel, he got really weak. He kind of fell on his knees with no strength. And they touched him and they strengthened him. But there's no torturing of God's people by an angel. All right, now this is pre-Islamic Allah. Way before he was born. Matter of fact, 2,500 years before Muhammad. There was a moon god, and in Mecca, and his name was Hubal. And there's a lot of story. I'm just shortening this quite a bit, okay? As referred to as Al-Il-El, and I might be butchering it, I'm sorry. It means the God. And shortening it, it was shortened to Allah before Muhammad came in the scene. Now, Muhammad dropped the name Hubal and just used the name Allah by himself. I forgot to write down here, but in the Kaaba, that big cube box in Mecca, they used to have 360 gods in there. And the chief god was Hubal. He was the boss, basically. And eventually, they threw all the gods away except him. And I'll show you a picture of him in a little bit. Although today, Islam is monotheistic, its roots come from paganism, believe it or not. All right, let's talk about the satanic verses. Now, this would be a statue of Allah. It's an actual statue of him. If you notice, there's a crescent moon right here, moon god. So it's actually an idol. The name got changed. And this is way back in Egyptian times. And there is the moon god with a different name and his 3 daughters. Bam, bam, and bam. Those 3 daughters are Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Manat, something like that. Basically, this one's really young and virgin. This one's like a mom. And basically, one of them is like a copy of Semiramis, and the other one is like Venus in different cultures. And this one's an older one. And they all stand for something. I just didn't want to go into too much detail. And this is from a different culture, also showing you the 3 daughters. So they've been around a while. One of them, I think, is that middle one. The mother is associated with a tiger of some, with a lion of some sort. But the satanic verses, basically, at first, Muhammad put him in there because I think he was trying to get in favor with a tribalman that was there originally. And he basically was saying that Allah had 3 daughters. These are them. And they should also be worshipped. This is where it says, these are the exalted cranes, which means intermarries, whose intercessions are to be hoped for. And that got deleted when the Quran became a standard thing. But basically, this is one of the things where that man who wrote the satanic verses years ago, where they put a contract out on him, he's still alive though, but for 20 years he was in hiding. He was giving some history of Islam, and they were not happy about it. Once again, going to violence. But this is Allah, and these are the 3 daughters. And basically, he said that Satan tried to trick him, but eventually he found out that it was a trick. So he was wrong, and that Allah did not have any daughters and did not have any sons. So he recanted from that. But once again, he got tricked by Satan. I mean, is there somebody you want to trust? So this is a bigger picture of Allah and the crescent moon. And if you notice, I have way more pictures to show, but this is probably the first picture of the moon god. And you can see where they have the crescent moon and they have the sun. Sometimes they'll put a star on it, and you'll see in some Egyptian writings or hieroglyphs. So Allah means the god. But anyway, this is what they use in most of the temples. They use that symbol on top. And there was a saying, a historical saying, that before Muhammad was there, they used to take that moon god and put him on top of the roof of the Kaaba. And eventually, they were doing that for a while, so it became a tradition to put this crescent symbol on top of all the mosques because they were doing it on the Kaaba for hundreds of years. Something like that. But it's not that important. All right, I'm going to show you where the Bible foresaw this and blocked Muhammad's message. They should not, no Christian should be believing this at all. And you'll see why. Now, Muhammad claimed to be the last prophet. And basically, he superseded anyone before him because they say the Bible's been corrupted and the New Testament has been corrupted. And basically, he was there to set it right. And that's why the Quran came about. But this is clearly not supported by the Bible. Matter of fact, in Revelation 22:18 and 19, it says that if any man adds or subtracts from this book, God will remove him from the book of life and add plagues to him. So he's basically telling you this is the end of the revelation of the whole scrolls of God's message. It's putting a finality on God's message. God also warns against preaching another gospel. And guess who preaches another gospel? They sure do. Now watch this. This verse is beautiful and it's totally against Muhammad because he says that an angel, Gabriel, gave him the message. Well, this is what it says in Galatians 1:8. It says that though we or an angel, that would include Gabriel, right? If he was even real, preach another gospel, let him be accursed. So God is putting roadblocks on this Islamic teaching. There's no way it can interpose itself into the Bible. Now, Islam is definitely another gospel to the extreme. Matter of fact, it's so extreme that Jesus, which is Isha in their language, Jesus Christ is not the Son of God. Now, when we were in Israel and where we were at the place where it was the tomb, it was like a small cliff there, about maybe 100 feet up from the tomb, and there was a big banner there. And the banner said that God has no son, right over the tomb of Christ. It's like, wow, that's really disrespectful. And Jesus was not crucified. Matter of fact, and was not resurrected. So is this not another gospel? Matter of fact, it's so far from the truth. It's actually an antichrist message. That's how far it is. It's against Christ. And not only is it against Christ, but I believe, I'm going to try to put it into the next series, that Muhammad didn't play at all in the Bible, but the religion of Islam, I believe, is definitely going to play in the future, which I will share with you shortly on that. Now, Jesus did it all, okay? We cannot work for our salvation. Islam is a work-based religion. It's a ticket straight to hell. You have to be 51% good. I mean, the Bible from the very beginning, I think it's a third chapter, maybe fourth chapter. It's right around there somewhere where it gives you the story of Cain and Abel. And Cain represented works and Abel represented grace. And God rejected Cain and accepted Abel. So from the very beginning, God rejects this works base. So in Ephesians 2:8 and 9, it specifically tells you that we're saved by grace as a gift from God. It's not what we do. It's because we would boast of it. Now, I'm not saying you don't do any works, but you don't do any works for salvation. Yeah, once you get saved, you go to work, but you don't work for salvation. That's very, very important. Jesus is the only way. And hopefully this has been pretty informative. It helped me pass this message. Give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and pass it down to your friends. This is the Bible Ranger, keeping the Bible simple yet rich in content. There's more to come.